And welcome back. We are doing some bacon, and I don't know what to call this, quite frankly, because I realized that I'm using Canadian maple syrup, and our good friends to the north have got some fraternity brothers who are from up that way and everything else, and they seem like a nice people. I decided to add to the Canadian maple syrup and also add something as opposed to bourbon, a good American God-fearing drink. I also decided to add some Crown Royal, another Canadian byproduct. So this is Canadian, not Canadian-American bacon, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it. Got some nice natural pork belly here from H-E-B. I was going to use this originally in some burnt ends, some pork belly burnt ends, but decided to go with some bacon instead. I'd been wanting to try a maple-flavored bacon, and I'm going to probably smoke this over a cherry wood. Mainly from a coloration perspective, plus I also like the flavor of cherry. Applewood's wonderful, mesquite's wonderful, especially like if I were doing, let's say, a mesquite honey. Of course, the go-to would be hickory. Hickory smoked bacon is kind of ubiquitous, but I think that cherry will pair nicely with the maple syrup and with the whiskey that's going to be in there. And to get started, we got to figure out the flavor profile. So here, it's very straightforward. Half cup of kosher salt, half cup of dark brown sugar packed, and a quarter teaspoon of Prague powder number 1. Prague powder number 2 is typically used for things that are going to be dry cured and will be left at room temperature. Prague powder number 1 is typically for shorter cures. It's used in sausages. It's used obviously in bacon. It's a good choice here. So what I want to do is just combine these agents real quick and get them all mixed up. I'm going to change up gloves in just a second. This is easier to do with 2 hands. And now what we need to add are the Canadian factors. Going to start with a half a cup of good maple syrup. And then I'm going to go ahead and do several ounces of good Canadian whiskey. And that can be done to taste. Again, what you're making really here is... Actually, I'm just going to use my hands for this. They're clean. What you're making is... I guess it really is a marinade, technically. I mean, you can see the composure of this. It's a soupy glop, I guess, to a certain degree. Over time, everything will break down nice and smoothly, and it's going to provide the ability for, again, over the next 8 or so days, may go as far as 10. I probably won't go over 10, even if it's not feeling quite where I want it. But what it's going to do is it's going to provide the ability for those flavors to really get in there. Now, when I vacuum seal it, I probably won't do a full vacuum because there is liquid in here, and while I love my little food saver, it doesn't always play nice with liquids. I probably need a chamber sealer at some point if I can talk myself into it. So everything's mixed up nice and smoothly. Going to go ahead and pour this in now and make sure that it is covering both sides as equally as I can. So at this point, what I want to do is go ahead and get this all massaged into the best degree possible. I could use my hands to get in there. I mean, the hands are the best tool you've got really in the kitchen, or at least Alton Brown would say that for most things. They are the ultimate multitasker. But one of the things that you do with a cure like this is you're going to be flipping this on at least a daily basis. I typically do mine once in the morning and once in the evening just to make sure that everything is distributed. And you're not looking, again, for perfect coverage because it will never happen that way. But what I do like to do is make sure that I've got space in the bag, let some drain, and then just let it cascade down the other side. This is going to be a sweeter bacon, a slightly sweeter profile. I've got some plans for this, of course. Making it into a burger prep would be wonderful, but I'm going to do a couple of other little sneaky things in the future where you'll get to see this and a couple of other side items. So now the next step is to get this sucker sealed. So with this, I will allow it to draw just a wee bit of air, but I'm going to keep a close eye on it. So you can see, of course, it's flattening out, and at this point, I want to get just a little bit more air because the liquid isn't traveling up yet. It's going to seal on its own. And now I've got a decent little package to put in the fridge. There's not going to be any worry about contamination. I will, of course, be making sure that it stays in a glass pan to make sure that it doesn't drip or anything else. But here's the bacon prep. Straightforward. Again, tons of flavor that's in this mixture. The salt, of course, I mean, salt is one of those flavors that I think that most people do enjoy, even if it's not always great for you in large quantities. But over time, I'm going to be massaging this. I'm going to be flipping this and making sure that, of course, it gets equal coverage over the entire piece of pork belly. So we're going to check back in 8 to 10 days. And at that point, I'll be rinsing it and getting it ready to put in the fridge so I can then slice it and use it in a variety of preps. So we'll be back in a few days. And after 8 days, the great bacon experiment resumes. It has been sitting for now 8 full days. It's firmed up. Tons of liquid's been produced as the salt draws out the moisture from it. You can see that it actually looks much more like bacon than pork belly now, and it's going to look like that even more once it goes in the smoker. But for now, not only do I need to drain off this liquid, but I will need to place this, or at least I'm going to choose to place this, in the refrigerator overnight in order for this to form a pellicle. And a pellicle is when there's a protein process where it basically forms a sticky goo. That is horribly unscientific, but that's the best way I know how to describe it. So this sticky goo, this pellicle, will form as air moves over it, as the cold interacts, and so on. Again, it's going to be in the fridge for about 24 hours before I start the smoking process. And that will allow the bacon to dry out a bit. So now that the bacon's out, we're going to give this a quick rinse. You know, some people choose to apparently submerge, you know, it really just in cold water to get the salt content off. My take on it is, if I did my calculations correct in terms of the weight of this, in terms of giving this a good rinse and making sure that any of the surface salt and the cure is off this thing, then it should taste fine without any sort of issue. Again, the look of this thing is gorgeous. It does feel like a bacon. In fact, right now, I could slice this up and it's ready to actually, it's cured. But that smoke flavor will add the traditional bacon flavor. So okay, so by now the bacon is thoroughly rinsed. And into the fridge it will go for an overnight ride to pick up that pellicle that I was talking about before. My hope is that the maple flavor really comes through. I really do love the look of this. It's a good piece of pork belly. It's got plenty of fat in there, but again, you can see how pronounced the lean is. That should be good bacon for almost anything, whether it's going to be a smokehouse burger, whether it's going to be, I don't know, you know, armadillo eggs where you wrap things in bacon. There are tons of things that I can turn this into. More than likely, I'm going to turn some of this into lardons that I can actually cook with. But again, bacon explosion, I'm hoping there'll be enough left of it once I distribute some to my friends that will be on the near horizon. So into the fridge for an overnight run. We will pick back up tomorrow with the actual smoking process. Okay, so the day for smoking for the bacon. It's been sitting for about 24 hours in the refrigerator, a little bit of air go over the top. You can see that it's dried to the touch. The pellicle, though light, has formed. I could have left it in for another 24 hours, but I'm content with the way it is right now. So the way I've got the smoker prepped is I'll be cooking this at 175. I'll be using my fireboard to manage temps. You can see that, again, I put a pan underneath to catch any drippings, mainly just to ease the need to take out the foil off the drip pan for the next smoke, for whatever that may be. But I'm going to leave it on the wire rack, the cooling rack. And my reasoning for this is simply ease, taking out, take it in, that type of thing. It's super simple. I am going to, again, as I mentioned before, be running this with temp on my fireboard, both chamber temp and for the protein itself. So I want to go as close to center as possible and as far in as possible. Again, the fireboard I can manage from my phone just like I can with the Blaz'n app for the grill itself. So again, it's going to go to 175 once I crank this sucker up. I'd usually leave mine at 250 for the startup process, but in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and go down to 225. Once it gets to temp, I'm going to back it down to 175, let it go for a nice, very controlled, slow smoke. I don't want this to be a traditional hot smoke. The pink salt in there made sure that it's going to be food safe through the smoking process. Once it hits 150, that's gonna be my target temp to remove, let it cool down to room temperature, refrigerate overnight, and that way I can slice up tomorrow. Okay, the final part of the bacon process. It's hit 150 and it is ready to come out. So it's looking great from this side of things. Again, temp management here is gonna be the key. It's not like most barbecue where it's purely by feel or whatever else, but not sure how well you can see that. Again, it's a rainy Texas evening. I let this go for 175 for most of the cook and then bumped it to 225 after about 3 hours. Beautiful look and shrunk up just a bit. I'll be able to get a better shot once we're inside. Okay, the proof will now be in the pudding. It looks like the bacon held up well overnight in the fridge. The smell of it still has that nice aroma of maple. Smoke definitely as well. A little bit of whiskey in the background. I don't know whether that's my imagination or not. For a first time, I'm thrilled. So what I want to do at this point is slice. And again, there is a right way to slice. I don't have a meat slicer. So for me, it's going to be just kind of eyeballing it and doing my best to come up with some slices. I want to square it off a little bit. As far as what the bacon looks like, I mean, that's bacon. Good marbling. I do like a higher fat content than some people on bacon, just kind of the way I grew up. And I also don't like bacon super crunchy. I'm kind of particular. So we'll see how this goes in terms of slices. I'm going to fry up a couple pieces and see how this goes. You know, some of these irregular chunks, for example, will make great lardons. I can cook with them. This is an experiment. A lot of this is going out to other people to kind of taste test for me, see if they like the recipe. I know one person is using it just as plain old breakfast bacon. I know that a family member is going to be using it as in cooking, green beans, everything else, to see what kind of flavors it imparts. And for me, I toyed with the idea of doing a bacon explosion. I want to save that for a different piece of pork belly I've got. So for me, this is probably going to start out first on bacon burgers. I picked up some nice sourdough buns, got some hamburger meat. There's nothing more American than a bacon burger. I'm not a fan of bacon cheeseburgers. That's a bit of an aside, which I'll get to in why I don't think cheese belongs on hamburgers. But we'll do that in another episode. So again, I'm going to continue slicing these things. I'm going to fry up a couple pieces as tests so you'll be able to see what it looks like. Okay, got some pieces of bacon going. Start off in a cold skillet, go over a medium heat. It's not rocket science on how to cook bacon. I do regret that my cast iron skillet is dirty and I'm too lazy to cook it, but I also needed a skillet a little bit bigger. The only thing I've got right now that's clean is my 10-inch skillet. Didn't want to cut the pieces down. The smell is amazing. So I'll show one more piece, one more quick snap when I flip them to show what it looks like, and then the taste test, and then this video will be in the can. All right, the epilogue for the bacon experiment goes on. So when in vacuum sealed up stuff that's going to go over to other people, that way they can freeze or cook immediately if they want to. Diced up some of the end pieces as kind of like little mini lardons I can use to season vegetables or whatever else. And then I've got some bacon that I'm going to be using for some burgers over the weekend. So I'm going to go ahead and leave those outside of a vac seal bag since I'm probably using them tomorrow. What? The moment of truth. Let's see how this tastes. I did the cold skillet, and I found that the residual sugars that were in the cure that I used probably, and well, maple syrup as well, probably caramelized a bit too much. It didn't really burn, but it did get super dark super quick before the bacon was done. So I kicked the heat back down to a lower setting and just let it go a little bit longer. As a result, it's a little stiffer than I like. I typically like a floppy bacon, I guess, but let's see how it tastes. Flavor is robust. That's the only way to put it. Definitely get the maple syrup in the background. Oddly enough, the whiskey comes through. I don't know. Is it worth the effort? Oh God, yes. The flavor is amazing. Diced up, and then maybe I don't know, like with a pasta. I think this would be amazing. It's, you know, the funny thing is the flavor of this is actually reminiscent of some of the Italian, you know, for example, cheeks like guanciale and so on. It's got that definite, it's not a hamminess, but it's definitely a little bit more than typical American pork. These were natural pork bellies, so hopefully starting with good pigs. I'd like to experiment with some Berkshire or Mangosita or something else, you know, a heritage breed pig, but For the time and effort I expend in this is definitely worth it. Again, if I'd gone with a longer brine, the salt probably would have been overpowering. I might try next time just go with a 7-day as opposed to an 8-day cure. I was very careful to make sure that I flipped the bacon daily in the fridge to make sure that once I didn't over penetrate compared to the other. But overall, this is a nice little daily snack, especially if you're doing carb-friendly things other than the sugars that went into it. But again, those mostly cook out both in the pan and in the smoker. Flavor's great though. Hopefully you try your own. I've seen videos for years people have done it. I've done it with other means, not this method. I've used an equalization cure before and wasn't crazy about the results. I found it to be too hammy. I think I might go with this brine technique moving forward. Again, I'm going to play around with it. I do want to do a peppered bacon soon, and I might try with some other unique flavors, but we'll see. So hopefully you enjoyed it. It's probably going to be a long video with the number of cuts I had to make. Well worth your time. Hope you guys enjoyed it.